No one really expects their world to collapse on an ordinary evening. Least of all, not at a celebration that's supposed to be about laughter, clinking glasses, and people you trust most. But it happened to me, right there, under the soft glow of fairy lights and laughter that suddenly sounded distant. It started like this. I was just an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life. My name's Daniel, 38, accountant by trade. I live just outside Denver, in a quiet neighborhood where the lawns are always trimmed, and the kids still ride bikes after dinner. I never imagined myself being the center of something so scandalous, so ugly. But then again, I never imagined my wife would betray me either. Her name is Claire, beautiful in a gentle way. Not the kind that grabs your attention in a crowded room, but the kind you keep thinking about even after the room is empty. We met through mutual friends at a holiday potluck. She made gingerbread cookies and laughed at all the wrong jokes. I guess that's when I started falling for her. People used to say we were the perfect couple. I don't know what that means anymore. We'd been married for 6 years. No kids, by choice, or so I thought. Our life was full of simple joys. Coffee in the morning, movie nights every Friday, Sundays spent walking around flea markets. She knew all my favorite songs, and I knew how she took her tea. We weren't dramatic or fiery. We were just us, until that party. It was a birthday party for one of her co-workers, Nathan, I think. She'd insisted we go, even though I wasn't in the mood. She said it would be good for us to get out more. You've been buried in spreadsheets for weeks, she teased, brushing her fingers through my hair before we left the house. I remember thinking how lucky I was in that moment. I wish I could slap that memory right out of my head now. We arrived at the party around 7. Claire looked stunning. Red dress, smoky eyes, that kind of effortless elegance that made people turn and smile without even realizing it. Everyone greeted her with such warmth. Some people barely nodded at me, though. I chalked it up to me being a stranger in her work circle. I stayed by the drink table mostly, sipping on watered-down whiskey, trying to make polite conversation. Claire mingled with the crowd, laughing too loudly at someone's joke, her hand touching someone's arm a little too long. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Jealousy's a tricky thing. It whispers doubts into your head and makes monsters out of shadows, but then I saw something. A glance between her and another man, tall, well-groomed, overly confident. I caught them standing a little too close in the hallway. She touched his chest briefly, just a second, but enough to freeze the air in my lungs. I watched as they whispered something, then looked away, like nothing had happened. My gut twisted. I didn't want to believe it. You don't want to believe the person you share your toothbrush holder with could be someone you don't actually know. I told myself it was harmless. Maybe he was a friend. Maybe I was being insecure. But the seed was planted, and it began to grow. Fast. The party stretched on. Around midnight, most people had left. I couldn't find Claire anywhere. Her coat was still on the rack, her purse by the couch. But she was gone. I looked upstairs. Bathroom was empty. Kitchen. Nobody. Then, I heard it. A sound from the garage. I don't know what made me walk toward it. Maybe I already knew. Maybe I needed to know. The door wasn't locked. I opened it slowly, the hinges creaking like in a bad movie. There they were, Claire and that man. She had her back against the wall, his hand pressed just above her shoulder. Their faces were too close, breaths fogging the cold air between them. She didn't look surprised when she saw me. Just blank. Dan, she said, straightening her dress. Her voice didn't shake. The man mumbled something and quickly walked past me, avoiding eye contact. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. I couldn't even move. What the hell was that? I finally managed to whisper. Claire sighed. Not guilty, not terrified, just tired. It's not what you think. God, how cliché. But the thing is, it was exactly what I thought. She tried to explain, said it had only been emotional, said it was complicated. said she didn't mean to hurt me. But her voice felt rehearsed, like she was reading a script she'd already practiced in the mirror. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked out. I got in the car, drove around the block 3 times before I even realized I hadn't gone home. I parked outside a closed diner and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror for a long time. Everything felt surreal, like the story belonged to someone else, someone foolish, someone who trusted too much. When I got back to the house, she was already in bed. I slept on the couch. The silence between us that night was heavier than any scream. The next morning, she made breakfast like nothing happened. Scrambled eggs, toast. I didn't touch it. We didn't talk about it for days. But the thing is, when someone betrays you like that, it doesn't just hurt. It shifts something in you, quietly, permanently. I didn't know it yet, but that moment in the garage, that brief glimpse of who she really was, had already started rewriting who I was too. And maybe the worst part, I still loved her. Or maybe I loved the version of her I thought was real, but she wasn't real. Not anymore. Not to me. The days that followed were the kind of quiet that's not peaceful, just hollow. The silence between Claire and me wasn't filled with anger. It was something else, something more dangerous, like 2 people living in the ruins of a house that still looked fine from the outside. She started acting softer, almost like nothing had happened, except now there was this strange tenderness in how she spoke to me. She'd linger longer by the coffee pot in the morning, glance at me more during dinner. One night she even rested her head against my shoulder while we watched some old sitcom we'd seen a dozen times. I didn't pull away. I should have. But I didn't. There's a kind of numbness that follows betrayal. You don't lash out. You don't scream. You just observe. You start seeing the details you once overlooked. How someone avoids your eyes when they lie. How their smile doesn't reach their voice. How guilt can wear the face of affection. One evening, a week after the party, she finally said it. "I'm sorry, Dan. Just that. Quiet. Sincere, maybe." But I didn't respond. She reached for my hand across the table. Her fingers shook a little. "I messed up. I was lonely. You've been so distant, working so much. I didn't mean for anything to happen." There, it was. The explanation. The subtle shift of blame. I was too distant. She was too lonely. We both contributed. Convenient, isn't it? How infidelity always comes dressed in shared responsibility. I didn't argue. What was the point? But that night, when she touched me in bed, slow, deliberate, almost pleading, I didn't respond. I stared at the ceiling while she kissed my neck. I heard her breathing falter when I turned away. That was the first time I felt a small, bitter satisfaction. She tried harder after that, cooked more, texted me during the day with little hearts and memories. She even suggested we take a weekend trip together, just the 2 of us. Her voice was light, hopeful. I agreed. I needed to see what game she was playing. We went up to Estes Park, rented a cabin with mountain views and a fireplace. She packed wine and candles. The first night we sat outside watching the stars. She wrapped herself in my hoodie and leaned her head against my chest like she used to. "You still love me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. She looked up, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. "I want to fix this. I really do." She sounded broken. But was it real? That's the hell of it. You never really know. Once someone has lied with a straight face, you start questioning everything. The tears, the apologies, the sudden sweetness. Are they genuine, or are they just a strategy? But I kept my mask on. I smiled. I kissed her back. I even made love to her that weekend, slow and unhurried. And when she cried afterward, burying her face into my chest, I whispered, "It's okay." It wasn't okay. Back home, she started behaving like the version of herself I once loved. She picked up old hobbies, started painting again, even began baking on weekends. She called her mum more, laughed easier, seemed lighter. Anyone else would have said, "She's changing, she's trying." But I wasn't just watching her. I was studying her, because something didn't sit right. I started looking deeper. Subtle things. The way her phone always faced down. The new passcode I didn't recognize. The way she suddenly had work dinners every other Thursday. I didn't accuse her. I just took notes. And I waited. One afternoon, while she was in the shower, her laptop chimed. A message notification. My heart thudded, but I didn't move immediately. When I did, I hesitated for a long moment before clicking it open. It was from someone named M. The message wasn't explicit. It was worse. It was familiar. It had a kind of intimacy only two people who've shared secrets use. Miss you. Already. Same place next time? That's all it said. Short, simple, condemning. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time, the hum of the bathroom fan in the background like a clock ticking away whatever was left of my patience. When she came out wrapped in a towel, smiling. I looked at her as if I were seeing a ghost. Not because she was caught, but because I finally realized something. She didn't regret cheating. She regretted getting caught. That night, I didn't say a word. I helped her cook dinner. I poured her wine. I listened to her talk about work. And when she kissed me goodnight, I kissed her back. But something in me had changed. I wasn't the man sitting quietly anymore. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to watch her destroy herself. There was still so much I didn't know. Who M was, how long it had really been going on, whether I'd been the fool for just a few months or for years. But I wasn't in a rush. Sometimes the best revenge doesn't scream. It waits. It learns. It plans. The thing about betrayal is, it teaches you patience. Before all of this, I wasn't the kind of man who planned. I trusted. I believed what people said. I assumed love meant loyalty, that marriage meant safety. But something changes in you when the person you trust most shows you how easily they can lie with a straight face. After I saw that message from M, I didn't lash out. I didn't even ask. What good would it do? I already knew she would deny it, twist it, cry if needed, turn herself into the victim if things got uncomfortable. So I kept quiet. Let her think the storm had passed. But behind the quiet, I was changing. Started going to the gym again, early mornings when she was still asleep. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself I had let go for her comfort. I upgraded my wardrobe, got a new haircut. People at work noticed, my friends noticed, even Claire noticed. "You look different lately," she said one morning, watching me button my shirt. In a good way. I just smiled. "Thanks." She smiled back and kissed me on the cheek, like nothing had ever been broken. But I wasn't fixing things anymore. I was rebuilding myself, quietly, carefully. I reconnected with old friends, ones Claire didn't like or had slowly pushed away over the years. We went out for drinks, caught up on life. I didn't mention the affair, not yet. It felt too raw, too personal. And besides, I was still gathering pieces of the truth. The message from M was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more signs. Receipts for places we'd never been together. Subtle changes in her schedule. A new perfume she didn't wear for me. Sometimes she'd come home glowing, light, on her feet, humming to herself. And other nights, she was quiet, restless, maybe guilty, maybe just tired from keeping up the act. One night, she fell asleep on the couch, her phone slipping out of her hand. I stared at it for a long time. You tell yourself not to look, that you're better than that. But the truth is, some answers only live in silence. And silence lives in that glowing screen. I unlocked it. There he was again. M. His name was Matthew. I recognized it from the birthday party. The confident guy in the hallway, the one whose laugh was too loud and whose eyes lingered too long. Her co-worker. The messages went back months. Some were flirty, some were explicit. Most were full of this strange, awful tenderness. He called her C, short, intimate, like she belonged to him. She sent him pictures, talked about missing him, talked about me. He's so sweet, but sometimes I just feel nothing. I know it's wrong, but with you, it feels real. I just need time to figure it out. It was like reading a play where I was the fool and everyone else was in on the joke. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she was all soft eyes and gentle smiles, made pancakes, sat across from me like we were still in some kind of fairy tale, thinking. Of taking a few days off? I said casually, sipping my coffee. Oh? You never take time off. Yeah, just need a reset, you know? She nodded, completely unaware. That's probably a good idea. You've been working so hard. She had no idea I already knew where Matthew lived. I wasn't going there to fight. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I just needed to see him. To see the man who thought he could borrow someone else's wife and walk away unscathed. I waited outside his building one afternoon. He came out alone, dressed sharp, earbuds in. He walked like a man who didn't fear much, like he hadn't helped shatter another man's life. He didn't notice me. I let him pass. I wasn't there for revenge. Not yet. I was there for clarity. And something inside me settled as I watched him walk away, because I realized he wasn't better than me. He was just reckless, maybe even desperate, and Claire, for all her grace, had let herself fall into that same desperation. They weren't in love. They were in escape, and I had no intention of making their escape easy. Back home, I started putting the next part of my plan into motion. I hired someone. Not to follow her, no, that would be too obvious. I had him dig into Matthew, his history, his finances, his habits. Turned out Matthew wasn't just a co-worker. He was married once, divorced 2 years ago under suspicion of cheating. He'd been let go from a previous firm for inappropriate conduct, though it was quietly buried. Interesting how patterns repeat. I also began gathering every piece of financial evidence in our marriage. Bank statements, joint investments, hidden savings. I made copies, organized files. You see, Claire had no idea I had slowly become the calmest version of dangerous. She thought silence meant forgiveness. She mistook stillness for weakness. But I wasn't weak. I was waiting, and I was building something. She wouldn't see coming, because you don't survive betrayal by screaming. You survive it by turning the wound into a weapon, and I wasn't done sharpening mine yet. It's strange how quickly pretending becomes habit. Every day, I played the role of the loving husband. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I texted her midday updates about work. I complimented her cooking, smiled through her stories, even nodded along when she spoke of her work stress. I gave her peace. But underneath, I was setting the stage for a storm. The man she cheated with, Matthew, kept showing up in her messages, like a shadow she couldn't hide. I didn't confront her. I didn't block him. I wanted her to keep talking to him, to get comfortable, to feel safe again. Because the longer she thought I was blind, the deeper she would dig her own grave. Still, even with all the planning, some part of me hoped she would confess, that she'd fall apart in front of me and beg. Not because I needed her guilt, but because I wanted to believe she was still capable of truth. But she never did. In fact, one evening, she came home early with takeout from my favorite Thai place, a bottle of wine under her arm. Thought we could do something spontaneous, she smiled. We sat on the floor, eating out of cartons, laughing at old sitcom reruns like we used to. For a moment, if I blurred my mind just enough, it felt real. But it wasn't. Because I knew what she had texted Matthew just hours before. He's so calm lately. It scares me. Think he knows. He'd replied, If he did, he'd have done something. Relax, babe. We're fine. I stared at her across the candlelit room, her face soft in the flickering glow, and I realized then, neither of them truly understood what kind of man I had become. A few days later, Claire mentioned she had a networking dinner coming up. It's with senior partners. Very formal. You don't need to come. Of course not. Matthew would be there. I nodded. Of course. Knock 'em dead. She smiled and kissed my cheek, grateful for the lack of resistance. That was the night I started implementing the first layer of the plan. You see, Claire had no idea that I had access to everything, her texts, her emails, even her shared company calendar. I knew she booked a hotel room after the dinner, not for herself, for him. A room charged to her personal card, thinking no one would ever check. But I wasn't just watching anymore. I was preparing, and I had already reached out to someone she would never expect, Amanda, Matthew's ex-wife. Finding her wasn't hard. A little digging, a few connections, and there she was, living just outside Boulder, running a small floral business. I emailed her under a pseudonym, cautious, respectful. I believe we have a mutual connection. I think your ex-husband is involved, with my wife. I'm not here to cause chaos, just looking for the truth, she replied 2 days later. You're not the first person he's done this to. He ruined our marriage. I'll talk. We met at a quiet cafe. Amanda was calm, articulate. Her eyes had the same kind of weight mine did. The look of someone who had loved and lost something they didn't even realize was fragile until it cracked. She told me about Matthew, about his patterns, about how he manipulated women, made them feel seen, needed, alive. But it was always about control. He'd cheated on her with a coworker, then another. Each time he begged, lied, promised it was over, until it wasn't. He's good at pretending he's the victim, she said, stirring her tea slowly. But he doesn't know what to do when the other person doesn't scream. That's when he gets sloppy. I nodded. That was all I needed to hear. With her help, I got what I needed. A written statement detailing his history, the accusations, the pattern. It wasn't enough to ruin him legally, but it was enough to plant a seed in the minds of people who mattered. Because the next part of my plan involved more than just personal revenge. I knew Claire was aiming for a promotion, partner track. It was all she talked about the last year. She'd worked for it, yes. But now I knew part of that climb was compromised. She wasn't just sleeping with a coworker. She was sleeping with someone with influence, someone who'd helped open doors, and I was going to close them. Quietly, I gathered everything, screenshots, emails, photos of their hotel check-ins, receipts, the timeline, but I didn't send it to her boss. No, I sent it to HR anonymously, and I knew how HR worked. Slowly, carefully. They'd investigate first, pull files, monitor activity, ask questions quietly. I wouldn't even need to be involved. But before that fire started, I had one more thing to do. I invited her to dinner. Just us. At the little Italian place we used to go before life got complicated. She looked surprised but delighted. Are you sure? She asked, her eyes wide. I mean, I'd love that, but I wasn't sure if we were... Yeah, I said. It feels like the right time. She wore that same red dress she wore to the party. I could tell she picked it on purpose. She wanted to remind me of who she was before, of what we used to be. But I wasn't interested in nostalgia. Halfway through dinner, she reached across the table and held my hand. I know I haven't been perfect, she said softly. But I feel like we're finding our way back, you know? I looked at her, my heart strangely calm. Claire, I said, can I ask you something? Of course. If you were me, would you forgive you? She blinked. What do you mean? If the roles were reversed, if I had done what you did, if I'd betrayed you that way, would you forgive me? Her smile faltered. Dan, I don't know what you're... I didn't say anything. I just watched her, and in that silence, she knew. I saw it, the moment her stomach dropped, the way her grip loosened on my hand, the way her eyes searched my face, hoping for a clue that she was wrong, but she wasn't. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just whispered, "I know, Claire." And I leaned back in my chair as she sat frozen, the color draining from her face. But that wasn't the moment I was waiting, for that would come soon enough. Because the next step, that was going to unravel everything she thought she still had. She didn't cry right away. After I told her I knew, she just stared at me, lips slightly parted, breath catching like it couldn't find its way out. I saw the flicker in her eyes, panic, calculation, then something colder, control trying to return. "Dan," she finally said, her voice measured. "Whatever you think you know." I cut her off, not loudly, not cruelly, just quiet, final. "I've read every message, Claire." Silence again. Her jaw tightened slightly. She folded, her hands in her lap, like a child waiting for punishment she wasn't sure would come. "When?" she asked. "Does it matter?" She swallowed. Her eyes glistened, but still no tears. No begging. No apologies. Just that haunting calm, as if she still believed she could steer this back into safer waters. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "But you did." A long pause, then barely audible. "Are you going to leave me?" I leaned forward, elbows on the table, speaking softly enough that only she could hear, though the restaurant around us buzzed with forks clinking and soft laughter. "I'm not going to leave you, Claire." Her head tilted slightly. Confused. "You're going to watch everything you thought you controlled fall apart, and then I'll leave." I didn't stay for dessert. I left her sitting there in that little red dress, the same one she wore when everything began to unravel. Only this time, her reflection in the wineglass was cracked. The next few days, she tried to hold it together. She brought me breakfast in bed. She wore the necklace I gave her for our anniversary. She lit candles at dinner. She asked if we could talk. She asked if we could start over, but it wasn't out of love. It was fear. Fear of what I might do. Fear that I wasn't reacting the way she expected. I kept my answers short, polite, neutral. The more I stayed calm, the more she unraveled. And then came the first break in the surface. 3 weeks after our dinner, her phone buzzed violently on the counter while she was in the shower. Normally, she kept it locked tight, but that morning, she had been careless. The message preview showed on the screen. "Claire, HR called me. What the hell is going on? You said it was handled." Handled? That word stayed with me. She'd known what she was risking. She thought. She could manage it. But now the cracks were showing. She came out of the shower moments later, humming softly. When she saw me near the phone, her expression changed instantly, like someone walking in to find a fire already spreading across the room. "You touched my phone?" she asked, masking her fear with mock surprise. "No," I replied simply. "Should I have?" She said nothing. That evening, she was quieter than usual, stirring her pasta around without eating. I didn't speak either, just observed. Let her imagination carry her further down the path of uncertainty. The next morning, the real unraveling began. She came home early from work, pale, shaking slightly. "I think someone at the firm reported me," she said, her voice brittle. "About Matthew. They're saying there might be an investigation." I looked at her, with all the calm in the world. "That's serious. You think I'd throw everything away for him?" she said suddenly, voice rising. "It was a mistake. It's over. I'm trying, Dan." Trying. I didn't answer. That night, she cried, in the shower, not sobbing, not screaming. Just that quiet kind of crying that shakes your breath. That sound haunted me more than anything else. because it wasn't the sound of someone who regretted what they did. It was the sound of someone realizing she couldn't fix it. 2 days later, I sent her the envelope. Plain white, no return address. Inside, printed screenshots of her texts, the hotel receipts, the anonymous HR email thread, and a single note in clean black ink. This is just the beginning. D. I came home to find her standing at the kitchen counter, the envelope open beside her, the papers spread out like pieces of a broken mirror. She didn't look at me when I entered. "How could you?" she whispered, almost to herself. "How could you be this cold?" I shrugged off my coat. "I gave you warmth for years. You didn't want it." She turned then, really looking at me. "I made a mistake." "No," I said. "You made a series of choices, deliberate, repeated, and you lied to my face while doing it." I didn't know what I was doing, Dan. I was lost. I leaned against the wall and studied her. Disheveled hair, trembling hands, the faint trace of wine and perfume still clinging to her. "You were never lost," I said quietly. "You just thought I'd never find out." She took a step toward me. "Are you trying to destroy me?" "No," I said. "You're doing that all on your own." And it was true, because HR had already escalated the matter. She'd been called into 3 meetings in the past week. Her name was now tied to something bigger: a breach of professional ethics, conflict of interest, potential manipulation of advancement. The whispers had started. I didn't even have to push, just nudge. Now she was the one, sitting up late, refreshing her email, checking her phone, scanning my expressions for clues. She was unraveling in real time, and I stayed calm, because people don't expect revenge to come dressed in silence. They expect rage, fire, fists. But I had none of those, just patience. And the next step? That was coming soon. Because while Claire was busy trying to stop the bleeding, she had no idea there was still one truth left. The one I hadn't told her yet. The one that would finally break her. She was losing sleep. I could hear her tossing and turning at night, sighing quietly into the darkness. Her thoughts louder than any words she dared say aloud. I kept my back turned to her, just breathing, just waiting. Some nights, she'd reach. For me in the quiet, just a hand on my back, a brush of her fingers along my arm, like she thought that maybe, if she could just touch me again, the version of me who loved her without question might come back. But that man was gone. He'd been buried in the ashes of hotel receipts and midnight texts to another man. And what? Rose in his place wasn't cruel, just done pretending. At work, her world was crumbling. The HR investigation had spread like a quiet fire. Paper trails were pulled. Employee testimonies whispered behind conference room doors. Claire's face had changed. She looked smaller, paler. Her eyes carried the weight of every lie she ever told. Still, she hadn't broken. Not yet. I had one more move left, one more piece to play, and it was time. I invited her to dinner again. No occasion, no setup. Just a quiet evening at home, lights dimmed, table set for 2. She wore a blue dress I hadn't seen in years, the one from our anniversary trip to Charleston. Maybe she thought it would help. Maybe she thought there was still a version of this story where we ended up okay. She smiled softly as she poured the wine. "You're different lately," she said. "Like, you've made peace with something." I smiled back. "I have." She tilted her head. "With us?" I held her gaze. "No, with the truth." She didn't respond, just set the bottle down a little too carefully. Her hands had started trembling again. I waited until we finished eating, until the room was quiet, until the candles burned low and shadows began to stretch across the walls. Then I stood up and walked to my study. When I came back, I handed her a small folder. She looked at it like it was a bomb. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." She did. Inside was a printed report, a DNA analysis, and a photograph, one she'd hidden deep inside a drawer in her closet. An ultrasound. Her fingers froze over the page. "I wasn't supposed to know," I said. "Right?" Her eyes didn't meet mine. You got pregnant, Claire. You terminated it. And you never told me. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I stepped closer. It wasn't mine, was it? Tears pooled instantly in her eyes. This time, real, not the performative kind, not the guilt-ridden ones that come with exposure. These tears came from the part of her that knew, finally knew, she had truly, utterly lost me. No, she whispered. That one word, so soft, so small, but it echoed like thunder in my chest. I couldn't, she began. I didn't know what to do. It happened right before the party. I was scared. I thought if I got rid of it, if you never found out. But I did, I said, voice low. I found the clinic papers. The appointment was on a Tuesday. You told me you were at a client meeting. You even brought home coffee that day like it was any other. She broke then, hands over her face, shoulders shaking, sobs spilling into the space between us like shattered glass. But I didn't move. I didn't reach for her. I let her sit in it, in the truth, in the unbearable weight of what she had done. I wanted to tell you, she gasped, so many times, but you were so good to me. You didn't deserve it. No, I said. I didn't. She looked up, red-eyed, face streaked with tears. I swear to you, Dan, I loved you. I still love you. I nodded slowly. I believe you. Her eyes widened slightly. Hope flickered, just for a second. But I don't care. The silence that followed was devastating. She stared at me like I'd just torn the sky down around her. I spent months, I continued, holding all of this, hoping maybe you'd come clean, that you'd be honest, that something in you would fight to be better. I stepped back. But what I've realized is, people only become who they are when they think no one's watching. She whispered my name, and I turned away. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said. The papers are drawn up. We'll separate assets cleanly, no mess. You can keep the house. I don't want anything that ever had your lies living inside. It. Her breath hitched. She covered her mouth like she might vomit. I'm done, Claire. I walked toward the door. And one more thing, I said, just as I stepped into the hallway. You might want to start looking for another job. They're voting on your status next week. The board already knows. She crumpled in the chair, like someone had just pulled all the oxygen out of the room. But I didn't look back. She had already taken too much of me, and now she was left with the only thing she truly earned, herself. Leaving the house for the last time was harder than I thought it would be. Not because I missed her, not because I doubted the choice, but because of all the things that lived in those walls that weren't lies. The way the sunlight hit the corner of the kitchen on Sunday mornings, the echo of laughter by the stairs when we used to trip over each other, racing to get dressed, the sound of her humming while brushing her hair at night. Those things weren't fake, but they weren't enough. I closed the door gently behind me. No slam, no dramatic pause, just silence. She didn't come to the door to stop me. She knew there was nothing left to say. The divorce moved quickly, surprisingly so. Maybe she wanted it done. Maybe she didn't have the strength to fight anymore. Or maybe, deep down, she knew she didn't deserve the chance to. I never spoke to Matthew again. I didn't need to. The board at their firm made their decision quietly, but clearly. Neither of them remained in their roles by the end of that quarter. Word spread just enough to make doors close softly around them in places they thought they'd always be welcome. They went their separate ways. Or maybe they didn't. I stopped checking. I didn't care. Because revenge wasn't what I thought it would be. It didn't bring the satisfaction people imagine when they fantasize about getting even. It didn't make the betrayal hurt less. It didn't rewind time. But what it did was give me clarity. It let me walk away knowing I didn't let someone else define me. That I didn't become small just because someone tried to shrink me. It's been a year now. I moved out of Denver. Smaller town, slower mornings. I work less, sleep better. I drink coffee on the porch without a voice in my head asking where she is, or who she's texting, or what lie I'm being fed for breakfast. I started painting again. Nothing professional. Just colours and silence, and the way a brush against canvas can say things you don't know how to name. There's someone new in my life. It's early, quiet. We don't talk about the past much. She knows I've been through something. She doesn't ask for the whole story. She just listens when I speak, and that's enough. Sometimes people ask me if I still think about Claire. I do, but not with anger, not with longing, just with distance. Like remembering a book you once loved, only to realize the ending was never meant to satisfy you. What did I learn? I learned that love isn't a shield, that trust, once broken, doesn't always scream when it shatters. Sometimes it falls apart in your hands like dust. I learned that kindness shouldn't come at the cost of dignity. And most of all, I learned that silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's strength. It's the space where you grow into the person who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. So to the people out there still putting themselves back together, to the ones sitting in the middle of their own heartbreak, staring at a world that no longer feels familiar, you will breathe again. You will sleep without replaying every moment, wondering what you missed. You will stop asking, why wasn't I enough? Because it was never about that. It was about them, their emptiness, their fear, their weakness. And you were always enough. They just weren't ready for someone who knew how to hold love with both hands. I don't regret the years I gave her, not because she deserved them, but because I did. Because I loved fully, I trusted deeply, and I walked away with my self-respect intact. That's not something she can say, and in the quiet of my new life, surrounded by peace, she can no longer reach. I've found something even better than justice. I've found freedom.